Hello, my name is Anne and welcome to a new video. On today's video I'm gonna talk about some of my favorite books. As I mentioned in my last video, the past 2 years have been my best reading years, so there are many new favorites I want to talk about. So I've divided my 5-star reads into 2 videos. On today's video I'm gonna talk about my favorite books of 2021 and 3 other books that I read before then. When I read these books back in the day, they became my favorites of all time, so I do want to mention them on my channel. Let's start with my 6 favorite books of 2021. That year I read 42 books and I have 6 5-star reads. I would classify 2021 as my middle grade era. Not all of these books are middle grade books, but they all feel very cozy to me. And I rank my books by enjoyment, so I will go from number 6 to number 1, which would be my favorite of the year. On number 6 we have The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. This is the first book in a graphic novel series, and I recommend all 3 books in the series. I discovered this book when I was at a friend's house. I saw the title and the cover art and I decided to read it right away, and I did not expect to love it as much as I did. This first book follows Greta, who's a blacksmith apprentice, as she meets some delightful characters and learns about the dying art of tea dragon caretaking. This series is for readers of all ages. It has LGBTQ+ and disability representation, and if you ever need a hug, this is the closest thing to a hug you will get from a book. It really is that good. So I would make myself a nice cup of tea and read on. You will finish this before your tea gets cold and you will feel a lot better after reading it. On number 5 we have The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This is a middle grade fantasy. I listened to the audiobook and I highly recommend it. Every time I reread it, I will listen to the audiobook because it is very good. So this story takes place in a fantasy world with witches, swamp monsters, tiny dragons and other whimsical creatures. So in this world there's this town surrounded by a forest where humans live, and every year they leave a baby in the forest as an offering to the witch, so that she leaves them alone 1 more year. However, the witch is very kind and she always takes these babies and gives them up for adoption in a faraway town. And the journey to this town is long, so the witch feeds the babies starlight and they become very skilled at different things. However, this particular year the witch feeds the baby moonlight by mistake. And as everybody knows, when you feed a baby moonlight, they become magical. So the witch has no other choice but to raise this baby herself. So the story follows Luna and her found family as she grows. She learns to use her magic safely and they live many adventures. This is another cute story that made me sob. The characters in this book are so lovable, so I highly recommend it. And if you are an adult who doesn't read middle grade, please give it a try because you are missing out. On number 4 we have Pages & Co. Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James. This is another middle grade fantasy and the first book in the Pages & Co. series. I've read all of the books in the series except for the one that just came out, and I enjoyed all of them, but I think that this one will always be my favorite. And actually this is the first audiobook I've ever listened to, so it holds an extra special place in my heart. Pages & Co. follows Matilda Pages, aka Tilly, who lives with her grandparents above their bookstore ever since her mom died after she was born. In this book, Tilly discovers that she's a book wanderer, which means that she can travel through books and meet her favorite literary characters. And by doing this, she will discover the truth about what really happened to her mother. And this is the first sentence in the book. Matilda Pages pushed open the door of Pages & Co. and breathed in deeply, taking in the familiar scent of just blown out candles, dark chocolate, and of course, books. And yes, it is the perfect line to describe how I felt reading this book, and I highly recommend it to all book lovers. Number 3 on the list is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel series, and there is also a TV show adaptation that will be at least 3 seasons long. The main characters in the story are Charlie and Nick, but it also follows their friends through their high school years. So the previous year, Charlie came out as gay, or rather he was forced out, and he suffered from bullying. And Nick is a typical, popular, sporty, heterosexual, or is he? And this story follows their friendship and romance. This series gets better with every single book. This one, the 4th one, is my favorite, but they are all 5 stars. And the TV show has also become one of my favorite shows of all time. It is my top comfort show, and I could watch it again and again. And honestly, I cannot choose between the books and the TV show. It has all the LGBTQ+ representation that your heart may desire and very good mental health representation. I am so happy that this exists, and every teenager and adult should read/watch this. Number 2 on the list is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is an adult cozy fantasy, and this story follows Linus Baker, who is a caseworker for the magical youth. So he travels to orphanages to oversee the well-being of magical children and takes his job very seriously. So one day he is sent to a very special home on a highly classified mission to make sure that the children there are not a threat to everyone in the world. I listened to the audiobook, and I must admit that it took me a while to get into it, but once I did, it is easily one of my favorite books ever. It is a character-driven story, not a plot-driven one, so you need some time to get to know the characters and fall in love with them. But once you do, when I finished this, I couldn't read anything else. I just wanted to look at fan art about the characters. I love it so much. And it has LGBTQ+ representation, and found family is a main theme in the story. I do want to mention that after I read this book, I learned that the author drew inspiration from residential schools to write it, and I understand that this can be difficult for some people, especially the indigenous people of North America. Finally, my favorite book of 2021 is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I would categorize this book as adult magical realism. And when I read this, I decided that 5 stars wasn't good enough, so I gave it 6 stars. Sadly, you can't do that on Goodreads, but no one can prevent me from giving a book 6 stars on my journal, so that's what I did. To tell you what it is about, I will first read a few words from the back of the book. The circus arrives without warning. It is simply there when yesterday it was not. Against the grey sky, the towering tents are striped black and white. A sign hanging upon iron gates reads, "Opens at nightfall, closes at dawn." And the book also follows 2 young magicians, Celia and Marco, who have been trained since childhood with the only purpose of defeating each other. Morgenstern's writing is so rich and lush, and she has created the most beautiful stage and atmosphere. This is not a plot-heavy book, and it is not for everyone, but it is definitely the one book that impacted me the most in 2021, and I will always remember my experience reading it for the first time. So those were my favorite books of 2021. Now I want to mention 3 other books that I love. I read these books before I discovered book 2, and I will only be mentioning 3 because I have reread this book many times, and so I know that they are favorites. However, there are many other books that I want to reread, and I will be mentioning those in the future, and they might become some of my favorites of all time. First, I'm going to talk about Le Cri de la Mouette, or The Cry of the Gull in English, by Emmanuel Laborie. It is a non-fiction book, a memoir of the author's early years. Emmanuel Laborie was born deaf inside a hearing family in the 1970s in Paris. In this book we follow her life and her struggles as she finds herself and finds community in a society where deaf people were highly misunderstood and mistreated. Emmanuel Laborie later became an actress and a director, and she was the first deaf actor to win one of the most prestigious theatre awards, the Molière. This book was shocking and heartbreaking, but also beautiful and hopeful, and a big learning experience for me as a hearing person. You will find this book very interesting, I promise. And I think that this is a book that every hearing person should read. This is my top recommendation from this video. Next, I'm going to talk about La Sombra del Viento, or The Shadow of the Wind in English, by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is an adult mystery, historical fiction drama. It takes place in Barcelona right after the Spanish Civil War, and it follows Daniel Sempere, who one night as a young boy rescued a book from the cemetery of forgotten books. And as he grows older, he will get involved in the history and the secrets of this book and its mysterious author. As I said in my previous video, this is the book that has had the biggest impact on me. I read it as a teenager and it was my first true love. It devastated me. And when I reread it now as an adult, I still appreciate it and I do recommend it. But it is because of my first experience reading this that cannot be recreated with this book or with any other book, that it holds a very special place in my top books of all time. And the last book in this video is 100 años de soledad, or 100 Years of Solitude, by Gabriel García Márquez. This is my favorite book of all time. It is an adult literary fiction novel and the best example of magical realism in literature. Gabriel García Márquez won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and this book is his masterpiece. The book follows the generations of the Buendía family across 100 years. It takes place in Macondo, a fictional town in Colombia, and we see that names are not the only thing that are passed on from one generation to the other. Through generational trauma and without the knowledge of the mistakes that were made before them, the members of the Buendía family are destined to see history repeat itself. Now, some advice to read this book. Keep the family tree close. Take your time to read it. And don't put it down for too long, because you will get this feeling of not remembering and you will want to start from the beginning. But the thing is, and this is my final thought, that you don't need to remember everything that happens. And that is all for today. The second part of the video is coming soon. But before I say goodbye, I do want to suggest that if you are watching this and if you have read any of these books, please give me your thoughts about it on the comments and tell me one or a few of your favorite books so that I can add them to my TBR. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!